Now this is something I really want to talk about to be sure that everyone is careful and stays calm at all times. Now this is something I really want to talk about to be sure that everyone is careful and stays calm at all times. Now for context, I lived in the middle of nowhere in Canada. Now for background, I lived in the middle of a remote place in Canada. It was an old town that had quite a few abandoned buildings due to absence of residents. It was an old town that had many empty buildings due to lack of residents. Me and many friends were tired of the lack of entertainment options for us. Me and many friends were tired of the no fun options for us. So what we did was explore these abandoned buildings. So what we did was check out these empty buildings. Prior to the experience I'm about to talk about, we never had anything too crazy happen to us. Before the thing I'm about to talk about, we never had anything really weird happen to us. Occasionally we'd see a small bit of blood like liquid. Sometimes we'd see a small bit of red liquid like blood. And we did see a pentagram on the grounds from someone who went to a house previously. And we did see a strange symbol on the ground from someone who went to a house before us. But nothing too bad till the last time I had gone exploring. But nothing too bad until the last time I had gone looking around. When I was younger, I used to go to a daycare that was part of a mental hospital. When I was younger, I used to go to a daycare that was part of a crazy person hospital. Which is kind of a weird combination, I know, but it closed down to a lack of patients and lack of children at the daycare. Which is kind of a strange mix, I know, but it closed down due to few patients and not enough kids at the daycare. I decided to go back there with my friends a few years ago. I decided to return there with my friends a few years ago. For context, I was 15 when this happened and most of my friends were the same age. For reference, I was 15 when this happened and most of my friends were around the same age. When we did get there, it was rather cliché. There was fog and it was rather dark and there was a light drizzle of rain. When we got there, it was typically spooky. There was fog, it was pretty dark, and a soft rain was falling. We went to the main gate, which was padlocked shut. We went to the main gate, which was locked tight. We decided to help each other hop over it and made a ton of noise. We decided to help each other climb over it and made lots of noise. We were laughing and giggling the whole time, unsuspecting of what was to come. We were laughing and smiling the whole time, not knowing what was coming. We looked around the small play place and park area with the flashlights that we had on our person. We looked around the small play place and park area with the torches we had with us. Even with our somewhat powerful flashlights, our visibility was rather limited. Even with our pretty strong flashlights, our sight was still limited. We decided to enter the decaying building. Glass and dirt crunched under our feet as we stepped into the daycare section of the complex. We decided to enter the old broken building. Glass and dirt cracked under our feet as we stepped into the daycare section of the place. There were still old Legos and wood chips from the previous furniture, old torn dolls and toys thrown about. There were still old Legos and wood bits from the old furniture, ripped dolls and toys thrown about. The further we walked around the daycare section, we naturally became more and more silent, till all we could hear was the crunch of the dirt under our feet. The more we walked around the daycare section, we slowly became more and more quiet, till all we could hear was the step on the dirt under our feet. I found some crayons in a plastic container in the corner of the room and I walked over to pick them up. I found some crayons in a see-through box in the corner of the room and I walked over to grab them. All of a sudden we heard a loud crash coming from behind a metal door leading to the psych ward part of the building. When suddenly we heard a loud bang from behind a metal door leading to the mental ward part of the building. And I all looked at each other as a whole. We were in a group of 5. And I all looked at each other. All together we were in a group of 5. Most of them were very bold and cocky. Most of them were very brave and full of themselves. We all looked at each other when my friend Brian suggested that we go to look and see where the sound came from. We all looked at each other when my friend Brian said we should go and see where the sound came from. Personally, I was not too fond of that idea. Personally, I didn't really like that idea. But with my group of friends, there was no way anyone was going to decline such a thing. But with my group of friends, there was no way anyone was going to say no to something like that. We all stacked up to the door and opened it. We all lined up at the door and opened it. It was rusted to the floor and we had to get it open. It was stuck with rust to the floor and we pulled hard to get it open. As we walked in, the metallic smells and must become stronger with a hint of something else which I couldn't put my finger on at that moment. As we walked in, the metal smell and dusty air became stronger, with a strange smell I couldn't name at that moment. We walked in, our flashlights pointed in every direction with Brian leading the group. We walked in, our flashlights shining in every direction, with Brian in front leading the group. The hallways were tight and to the left and to the right were the occasional metal doorway, some with doors open. The hallways were narrow and to the left and right were sometimes metal doorways, some with doors open. I felt slightly claustrophobic and it felt a little hard to breathe as we continued. I felt a bit trapped and it felt a little hard to breathe as we kept going. Brian lit his flashlight into a room. We all stopped walking as Brian slowly entered. Brian pointed his flashlight into a room. We all stopped walking as Brian slowly went in. What is it? I asked him. What is it? I asked him. I thought I saw someone here but it seems fine now. I thought I saw someone here, but it looks okay now. To be honest, I thought he was just messing with us to increase our anxiety. To be honest, I thought he was just joking with us to make us more nervous. But looking back, I think he was being completely honest. But thinking back, I think he was being totally honest. He backed out of the room and we continued walking deeper into the psych ward. He came out of the room and we kept walking further into the psych ward. When another friend swiftly told us to stop. Then another friend quickly told us to stop. We came to a halt and all listened. We stopped and all listened. In the distance ahead of us, we heard the subtle pitter-patter of footsteps echo through the hallway. In the far area ahead of us, we heard the soft tapping of footsteps echoing through the hallway. We all looked at each other with fear in each of our eyes. We all looked at each other, scared in each of our eyes. Brian continued walking. Brian kept walking. Towards his sounds, we'd considered turning back for a second without Brian wondering if some ghost or someone was in the building, but we couldn't do that to him. Towards his sounds, we thought about going back for a second without Brian, wondering if some spirit or someone was in the building, but we couldn't do that to him. The closer we got, the more I felt like I was being watched. The closer we got, the more I felt like someone was looking at me. When finally we entered a room on the right which had the smell of rotting meat. Then finally we went into a room on the right that smelled like old spoiled meat. In front of us was a dead deer. Its innards were spilled all over the floor, staining the concrete. In front of us was a dead deer. Its organs were spilled out all over the floor, coloring the concrete. A friend of mine had a very weak stomach and vomited all over the floor. One of my friends had a sensitive stomach and threw up all over the floor. That's when we heard whispering from somewhere. That's when we heard soft talking from somewhere. Brian lit his flashlight to the corner of the room where a man with short hair was standing with his head down. Brian pointed his flashlight at the corner of the room where a man with short hair was standing with his head lowered. He wore a bright green t-shirt stained with what I assume was blood and torn beige pants. He had on a light green t-shirt stained with what I think was blood and ripped beige pants. He did not have any socks on and his feet seemed damaged. He wasn't wearing socks and his feet looked hurt. He was twitching sporadically and continued to mumble even after we saw him. He was shaking randomly and kept mumbling even after we saw him. We stared at him for a solid 30 seconds before he made his first true movement. We looked at him for a full 30 seconds before he made his first real move. He looked up at us with a haunting grin that sent shivers down our spine. He looked up at us with a creepy smile that made us shiver. "You guys here for the feast?" he asked. "You guys here for the big meal?" he asked. This kicked us over the edge and we bolted out of that room all the way back to the daycare center. That pushed us too far and we ran fast out of that room, all the way back to the daycare center. The door was still open and we decided to try and slam it shut, but the rust and pure weight of the door almost kept it open. The door was still open and we decided to try and close it fast, but the rust and heavy weight of the door almost kept it open. It actually took 3 of us pulling with all of our strength to close it. It actually took 3 of us pulling with all our power to close it. And just before we did, I could still see the silhouette of the man watching us, with his white teeth being the only other human feature I could see. And just before we did, I could still see the shadow of the man watching us. His white teeth were the only other human part one could see. The metal door, catching our breath for a second, all looking at each other for confirmation that we all saw the same thing. At the metal door, we took a breath for a second, all looking at each other to make sure we all saw the same thing. After a little bit of labored breathing from each of us, we heard a light tapping on the door. After some heavy breathing from all of us, we heard a soft knock on the door. That's when we decided that it was time to leave. That's when we chose it was time to leave. We booked it out of the vicinity completely and ran home. We ran fast out of the area and went home. A year after we visited that spot, police went back to do a routine search of the area and found the man. A year after we went there, police went back for a regular check of the area and discovered the man. It was stated that he used to go to the psych or before it was closed down. They said he used to go to the mental hospital before it was closed down. He escaped the facility he was transferred to and lived off the wildlife around the complex. He ran away from the place he was moved to and survived off the wild animals around the complex. When the cops brought him in, he had a series of diseases and sicknesses from eating raw meat. When the police caught him, he had a lot of illnesses from eating uncooked meat. His mental condition was much worse than before. His mental health was much worse than before. There were future rumors that he did kill someone in the forest while searching for food once, but nothing has been confirmed. There were later stories that he might have killed someone in the woods while looking for food once, but nothing was proven. In the end, guys, be careful, especially in dangerous areas like abandoned buildings. In the end, guys, stay safe, especially in risky places like empty old buildings. The house I live in is only a couple hundred meters away from a small church in a suburb. The house I live in is just a few hundred meters from a small church in a neighborhood. Although I was brought up as a Christian, I was never really that religious, and I only went to said church whenever my parents took me as a kid. Even though I was raised Christian, I was never that deep into religion, and only went to that church when my parents took me as a kid. My dad died when I was a teenager and we stopped going as a family altogether. My dad passed away when I was a teenager and we stopped going to church as a family. After that, I only went whenever my friends asked me to tag along. After that, I only went when friends asked me to come with them. Now I'm 21 and I only pass by the church whenever I have to go into the city because there's a dirt road beside it that leads to the parking lot behind. Now I'm 21 and I just pass by the church when I go into the city. There's a dirt road beside it that goes to the back parking area. Adjacent to a major road where it was easy to get on a bus to work, it was closer than the village gate in the opposite direction, and I only had to ride one bus from there. Next to a big road where it was simple to get on a bus to work, it was nearer than the village gate the other way, and I only had to take one bus from there. I'm not an easily scared man, nor have I previously experienced lasting trauma after being scared, and I'm here to tell you that what I saw beside that church 3 months ago still haunts me to my core. I'm not someone who gets scared quickly, and I've never had any deep fear that stayed, but what I saw next to that church 3 months ago still terrifies me inside. A storm was announced to hit earlier that week, but leaving for work early Thursday morning, the skies were clear, not a single cloud to cover the starry skies, so I didn't bring an umbrella. A storm was forecasted earlier that week, but when I left for work that early Thursday, the sky was clear, not even one cloud hid the stars, so I didn't bring an umbrella. I climbed over the parking lot gate because it was chained shut until 6 o'clock for the first mass. The guard at the outpost didn't mind because the church staff knew my family. I jumped over the parking lot gate because it was locked up until 6 o'clock for the first church service. The guard at the gate didn't care since the church staff knew my family. Pretty well, I work at a hotel as a line cook and it's a very demanding job. I have to leave home before the sunrise and most days I work long after it has set. Quite well. I work at a hotel as a line cook and it's a tough job. I leave home before morning and most days I stay long after the sun is gone. The only time I get to see the sun is if I'm assigned to a station at the buffet where we have a view to the poolside. The only time I see daylight is if I work at the buffet station, where we have a window looking at the poolside. It was an average, overworked, and underpaid kind of day for me. I wasn't assigned to the buffet line. I stayed in the kitchen where there weren't any windows. It was a normal, tiring, and low-pay kind of day for me. I wasn't at the buffet line. I stayed in the kitchen where there were no windows. So I was surprised to see the flooded streets when I clocked out. Apparently it had been raining heavily all afternoon and it subsided around sunset. So I was shocked to see the water-filled streets when I finished work. It had been pouring rain all afternoon and slowed down around sunset. It was around 8 o'clock in the evening when I left the hotel, and in my country flooded streets meant standstill traffic for at least a couple of hours. It was around 8 p.m. when I left the hotel, and in my country, flooded roads meant no moving traffic for at least a few hours. This wasn't that uncommon. This wasn't that rare. But dealt with similar situations before. It also meant I could sleep on the bus, so it wasn't that upsetting. Been through stuff like this before. It also meant I could nap on the bus, so it wasn't that bad. Fast forward to around midnight and it's pouring out again. I'm not too far off from the church parking lot, so I decided to get off the bus and start walking because it had not budged for the last 10 minutes. Skip ahead to around 12 a.m. and it's raining hard again. I wasn't too far from the church parking lot, so I chose to get off the bus and walk, since it hadn't moved in the last 10 minutes. I put my phone and wallet in my waterproof backpack, which also contained a spare shirt, my house key, and my knife set. I placed my phone and wallet in my rainproof bag, which also had an extra shirt, my house key, and my knife kit. I didn't mind getting wet around this time. The parking lot gate was already chained shut, but I climbed over it like I usually do. I didn't care about getting wet. Around this time the parking gate was already locked up, but I jumped over it like I always do. It was flooded knee-deep in the parking lot and there was no security guard at the outpost. I figured he retreated into the church. It was filled with water up to my knees in the lot, and there was no guard at the post. I guessed he went inside the church. It was really dark, but I focused on the small amount of light coming from the houses in the distance. They really only looked like dots from that far. It was super dark, but I focused on the tiny bit of light from houses far away. They looked like little dots from that distance. I trudged my way through the open parking lot that could have passed a kiddie pool when I hear this strange sloshing at the far corner to my left. I walked slowly through the open lot that could pass as a kiddie pool when I heard a weird splashy noise in the far corner to my left. Due to the heavy rain, I couldn't clearly make out what was there, but I knew that I wasn't alone. Because of the strong rain, I couldn't really see well what was there, but I knew I wasn't alone. All the lights to the lot were shut, and the only things to guide me were the few lights of the houses far ahead in my memory of the area's landscape. It's a straight shot from a dirt road, so I didn't have to worry about a light source. All the lights in the lot were turned off, and the only things helping me see were the house lights far ahead. I remembered the area well, and it was a straight walk down the dirt road, so I didn't need extra light. The sound of all the falling raindrops accumulated into a dull static noise, so it was easy for me to hear that there was something going on in that corner. The sound of all the raindrops falling turned into a low white noise, so it was easy for me to notice something happening in that corner. I could see the shape of a person who seemed to be sitting down, so I could only see from the waist up. I could see the outline of a person who looked like they were sitting, so I could only see them from the waist up. As I got closer and my eyes better adjusted to the dark, I could tell that it was a woman because of her long hair and curvy outline. As I walked closer and my eyes got used to the dark, I could tell it was a woman because of her long hair and curvy shape. She was flailing her arms and splashing the water around, grunting as she pounded her fists into the water. She was waving her arms and throwing water everywhere, groaning as she hit the water with her fists. She was about 2 cars lengths away, so I wasn't that concerned about it. I've dealt with crazy people before. She was around 2 car lengths away, so I wasn't too worried. I've met strange people before. I glanced over a few times as I passed her, then I got to the dirt road, quite unnerving. She was out of my line of sight at this point, and the mud made it hard to walk. I looked back a few times as I walked past her, then I reached the dirt road. It was pretty creepy. She was out of sight now, and the mud made walking tough. Water was only ankle deep now, but I kept having to jerk my foot free after each step because my shoes would sink in the mud. Water was just up to my ankles now, but I kept having to pull my foot free after each step since my shoes kept getting stuck in the mud. A small splash made me look over my shoulder, and a quiet splash made me turn my head, and in the darkness of that dirt road the woman was spelled out face first in the shallow water. I froze, thinking whether or not I should help her. In the dark of that dirt road, the woman was lying down, face first in the low water. I froze, unsure if I should help her. I truly hated the thought of being the guy who let someone drown in water 6 in deep. I really couldn't stand the idea of being the guy who let someone die in just 6 inches of water. She was about 10 steps away from me, and before I could decide what to do, she started to move. She was around 10 steps away, and before I could figure out what to do, she started moving. It was too dark to see any details, but her outline was distinguishable enough for me to see that she was looking up at me. It was too dark to see details, but her shape was clear enough for me to see she was staring up at me. She slowly got on her hands and feet like she was about to stand, but her hands lingered on the grounds. She slowly got on her arms and legs, like she wanted to stand, but her hands stayed pressed on the ground. I was already scared and pale at this point. My legs didn't work, and I thought of reaching out for my knives, but I was afraid to move. I was already frozen with fear. My legs didn't function, and I thought about grabbing my knives, but I was too scared to move. And then she starts crawling toward me on her hands and feet. This sent a jolt through me, and all of a then she started creeping toward me on her hands and feet. This sent shock through me, and all of a sudden I'm sprinting toward my house. I could hear the splashes behind me along with her coarse breathing, almost like she was coughing. Suddenly I was running fast toward my house. I could hear the water splashes behind me and her rough breathing, almost like coughing. My eyes started filling with tears, and the rain against my face made the light in the distant houses blurry, but I knew that at that point I was running for my life. My eyes started watering, and the rain hitting my face made the far-off lights blurry, but I knew then I was running to survive. I couldn't tell if she was catching up, but I didn't have it in me to look back. I couldn't know if she was getting closer, but I didn't have the strength to look back. I heard her yell in a voice so rough it resembled a pig squeal, short, sharp, and loud, a wordless shout of anger. I heard her scream in a voice so rough it sounded like a pig squeal, quick, sharp, and loud, a scream of rage. I believe that was the fastest I ever ran in my life. At this point I couldn't hear anything but the rain, deafening, unrelenting, and violent. I think that was the fastest I'd ever run in my life. At this point, I couldn't hear a thing but the rain, loud, non-stop, and wild. My house was close. I sped by a few houses with their dim porch lights, and I could tell that I was running on my house was nearby. I rushed past a few houses with faint porch lights, and I knew I was running on asphalt. I didn't know when it happened, but apparently I lost my shoes back at the dirt road. Blacktop. I didn't know when, but I'd lost my shoes somewhere back on the dirt road. One last bend and I was at my doorstep. Finally, I forcefully tore my backpack zipper open and I fumbled around the inside for the key, frantically looking around to see if she was still chasing me. One final turn, and I was at my door. I ripped open my bag and searched inside for the key, panicking and looking around to check if she was still behind me. I got in the house and slammed the door shut and collapsed. I don't recall the rest of that night, but when I woke up the next morning in my bed, my older brother filled me in. I got inside and slammed the door shut, then I fell down. I don't remember anything after that, but when I woke up the next day in bed, my big brother told me what happened. He was awake when I got home that night and went to the front door. When the noise alerted him, he said I was on my knees leaning against the door and quietly sobbing to myself. He was up when I came home that night and checked the front door after hearing noise. He said I was on my knees, leaning on the door, crying softly. He woke my mom and he woke up my mom and they were trying to console me, but I wouldn't talk. They tried to ask me questions, but I would just shake my head. They tried to calm me, but I wouldn't speak. They asked questions, but I only shook my head. They got me into some dry clothes and led me to my bed over breakfast. I explained what happened and my mom said she'd notified the village guards. They helped me change into dry clothes and took me to bed. Over breakfast, I told them what happened. My mom said she told the village guards. I could tell that they were concerned for my safety, but they didn't understand the fear I felt. My brother even joked about it. I could tell they worried about me, but they didn't understand the fear I felt. My brother even made jokes about it. I didn't go to work that day. In fact, I took the rest of the week off because I caught a fever. I didn't go to work that day. I actually took the whole week off because I got a fever. The guards did a minor investigation and even increased patrol for a while, but they didn't find anything except for my shoes in the parking lot. The guards did a small check and even added more patrols for a bit, but they didn't find anything except my shoes in the lot. I can't walk alone anymore without glancing over my shoulder every 5 seconds. Sudden loud noises make my heart jump, and I can't even stand the fact that I can't walk alone anymore without checking behind me every few seconds. Sudden loud noises make me panic, and I can't even stand the sound of rain. I've been getting better, though I can sleep with the lights off now. I just wish I would stop seeing the crawling woman shape and I start drifting off to sleep. Sound of rain. I'm slowly getting better. I can now sleep with the lights off. I just wish I'd stop seeing the crawling woman's shape when I start falling asleep. I wish I could tell you more about her. I honestly do, because it's one thing to be afraid of something, but when you lack the understanding of what you fear, your mind fills in the blanks with terrifying detail. I wish I could say more about her, really. It's one thing to fear something, but when you don't know what you're scared of, your mind makes up awful images to fill in the blanks. I was back home for the summer for the first time in a year after starting uni. Our home was and still is just outside of a small town with forests all around. I came home for summer break, for the first time in a year since starting college. Our house is just outside a small town, surrounded by forest. There was also a small man-made lake which diverged from a river that ran for miles through the forest and ramified into a few streams. There's also a small fake lake, made from a river that runs for miles through the forest and splits off into little streams. East of the lake near my home there was a small grassy path that led to the river following a stream. To the east of the lake near our house, there's a grassy path that leads to the river, following one stream. It was a long walk, but one I used to go on often as a child. I knew the forest there quite well, and I knew where I could cut through the dense trees to meet the stream. It was a long walk, but one I took often as a kid. I knew that part of the forest pretty well and knew where to cut through trees to find the stream. The walk that I would go on always led me off the path, which turned northwest slowly so away from the stream, and then took a sharp turn to the west. The walk I always took would leave the main path, which slowly turned northwest, moving away from the stream, and then turned sharply west. After a few miles walk, at which point the stream was hidden quite deep into the forest. After walking a few miles, the stream would be hidden deep in the forest. I'd continue to walk north and follow the stream through the forest to get to the river, then follow the river west to get to the lake. I'd keep walking north, following the stream through the forest to reach the river, then follow the river west to get to the lake. It's honestly pretty easy to get lost in this forest because the terrain isn't just a slope down to the water, it goes up, and it's very easy to get lost in that forest because the land doesn't just slope down to the water. It rises and down and you end up completely surrounded by trees, but I've spent many days wandering around there alone or even with my dad over the span of 18 years and I never saw anyone else in that forest. Up and down, you get surrounded by trees. But I spent many days walking there, alone or with my dad, over 18 years. And I never saw another person in that forest. I went there twice this summer, both times alone. The first time I left in the morning, I walked along the pathway from the stream to the sharp bend, then I cut back into the forest. I went there twice this summer, both times by myself. The first time, I left in the morning. I walked the path from the stream to the sharp bend, then turned back into the forest. I reached the stream after an hour or so as I was running my hands in the water. I heard a bell from far away coming from the north. I got to the stream after about an hour. As I ran my hands through the water, I heard a bell sound far away, coming from the north. Something was making a bell ring fervently and periodically, which I found strange. I listened while wondering if it was a lost hunting dog and I started moving towards the sound, but soon something was ringing the bell again and again, which I found strange. I listened, thinking maybe it was a lost hunting dog, and started walking toward the sound, but I quickly realized it couldn't have been an animal. I could tell the bell was too heavy because of how clear the sound was to be on a collar. Realized it wasn't an animal. The bell was too loud and heavy to be on just a dog collar. I could tell from the clear ringing. I kept moving and the bell was moving away from me and it stopped completely after 5 minutes. I kept walking and the bell kept moving too, farther away. After 5 minutes, it stopped completely. The stream also wasn't big enough or strong enough to carry a bell that could have been enclosed in a tent or something, and the river was too far still. The stream wasn't strong or wide enough to carry a bell, like if it had fallen from a tent or something, and the river was still too far away. I thought of everything but nothing explained the sound apart from one obvious thing which I just didn't feel comfortable with for some reason. I thought of every possible reason, but none of them made sense, except one clear idea, which I just didn't want to accept for some reason. I knew it had to have been a person, but I stopped thinking about it and I just walked on normally until I found a badger, a blooming dead one, carefully decapitated. I knew it was a person, but I stopped thinking about it. I kept walking normally until I found a dead badger, recently killed, head cut off very carefully. It had obviously been done with a knife. It was fairly fresh, the body was still limp and there wasn't too much smell coming from it. It was clearly cut with a knife. It was still fresh, the body was limp, and it didn't smell too bad yet. The wound was full of maggots, but I knew that was something that happens soon after exposure. The cut was filled with maggots, but I knew that happens pretty fast once it's exposed. The sound of the bell had been following the stream, so the badger was put there, maybe killed there or at least decapitated while I was walking that way, I suppose. The bell sound had been moving along the stream, just like I was. So the badger was either killed or placed there. While I was walking that way, maybe right then. I don't know really, but nothing else happened that day. I don't really know, but nothing else happened that day. 1 week later I went back for the second time that summer, and the last time ever I left home at around 6 p.m. and I made it to the stream, then walked to the river in an hour. 1 week later, I went again. It was the last time ever. I left home around 6 p.m., got to the stream, then walked to the river in about an hour. Then I decided to go back the way I came because it was getting late and it was raining quite. Then I decided to head back the same way. It was getting late and it had started raining a lot. It was raining very hard. The sun went down around 9 p.m. I was walking as fast as I could. The sound of the rain in the trees was very strange and loud. I was almost running with my head down through the clearest and most open part of the forest. Then I bumped into something heavy. The smell was really bad. It was the rotting body of the badger. Its head was tied to its front paws, and it was hanging and swinging from a tree. It was a disgusting, wet, stinky mess, dripping with green liquid. I started gagging. Some kind of sticky, slimy fluid got in my hair. It was just gross. At first, I just stared at it. Then I started moving nervously because I felt like I was covered in its disgusting juice. I was already wet from the rain, and my senses got mixed up. It felt like someone threw a bucket of ice-cold water on me. Then I realized I had walked the same way to the river. So someone must have hung the badger's body after I passed it. Someone knew I would see it. So was someone watching me and moving around in the forest? I heard faint sounds of branches breaking nearby, not from animals. I looked around and started jogging. I was half running, half walking away from the stream, going back to the path. Then I heard the bell ringing again. I called my dad while running. I told him to meet me on the path where it turns sharply west. It was the closest. I told him to come as fast as he could and that someone was in the forest. I can't explain how I felt. It was like my intestines and stomach were twisting. I literally felt the hairs on my neck stand up, even though I was soaked from the rain. It was dark, and I jogged as fast as I could. I was panicking because the path was still too far away, not close enough to feel safe. It was still raining, and every sound was muffled. I felt like everything was farther away than normal. The bell kept ringing for a long time, going on and off, and I felt like it was all around me. The fear, my hard time hearing, and difficulty breathing made me lose my sense of direction. I knew I was going southwest, but I wasn't sure what I was even doing. I was breathing hard like a horse, coughing, almost crying like a baby. I kept tripping over leaves and sticks like an idiot. But I stayed on the phone with my mom. She was on her way with my dad. I kept hearing sounds but didn't know what they were. My mom was yelling on the phone, saying they were on the path and that I needed to run fast. I was as scared as you can imagine, so I went into survival mode. I was doing that half running, half walking thing again because I was out of breath. Then I heard branches breaking and clear footsteps coming from deeper in the forest. The bell was ringing louder. I didn't want to, but I looked over my shoulder. That's when I saw what was with me in the forest. A tall figure moving slowly toward me at the edge of the clearing, ringing the bell in front of his stomach. I could tell he was looking right at me. I don't know if I suddenly found some secret sprinting power or if adrenaline made me super fast, but I ran for my life. I didn't look back even once. I screamed as loud as I could, "I'm on the phone with the police. They're on the path. Dad, I can see you. I'm here." I wanted to shout, "Dad, please, where are you?" but I kept that to myself. I felt like something terrible was about to happen, and that the man was right behind me. I kept telling myself not to look back. I was gasping for breath. I was wheezing, crying so hard, and screaming for my dad. I even dropped my bag, but I only realized it was gone when I got in the car. My phone felt like my only way home. Nothing felt real anymore. It was like my legs were moving by themselves. I didn't know if the man was still following me. All I could hear was my heart pounding in my ears and the ringing bell. Then I finally heard my dad shout my name. I knew he was coming toward me because of how he said it. He could see me. I practically threw myself at him when we met. My dad heard the bell too. My mom could hear it on the phone while she waited in the car, ready to leave fast.